Hmm. Now, how about now? A cheers to you all out there this evening. A little Crown Royal glasses. We are toasting Bloom, a Thursday night game that's worth a damn and one that's fun. Let's get a game update, baby.
Well, what's been interesting tonight is Philip Rivers uncharacteristically making some yips under pressure, just a couple of throws under pressure that he didn't step into, and another one that he just didn't need to make, and that's one of the big differences. Chargers made a stop on defense, but what we've seen is Keenan Allen. So on the Chargers side, Justin Jackson not really getting a chance to get going because the Chargers were down 14-0 pretty early on. Keenan Allen makes almost an amazing catch in the corner of the end zone, hurts his hip in the process. So a lot of Keenan Allen teams are not looking good. Philip Rivers' team's not looking good right now. Mike Williams actually is the guy dominating things for the Chargers. On the Chiefs side, Patrick Mahomes doing his thing, making a couple of unbelievable plays, an unbelievable touchdown pass to Demarcus Robinson. When his body language said he's throwing it away, he has Adrian Phillips hanging off of him and still makes one of those little spinner throws to a streaking Demarcus Robinson, makes another touchdown throw later on. And Damian Williams looks great. Damian Williams looks better than he ever did with the Miami Dolphins. And they haven't really lost anything going down to their third string running back now. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce not doing quite as much, but the Chiefs getting a lot of pressure on Philip Rivers, and on offense, just business as usual with Patrick Mahomes always finding a way.
Chiefs defense fired up. Matt, quickly, your thoughts on your man Mahomes?
I mean, he looks great, but I mean, it's just fun to watch Philip Rivers have the reactions that he does. Like, the way that the broadcast team interviewed him said, the first game, he said, I saw throws and I thought to myself, I can't do that, and for him to kind of in the first touchdown have the same kind of reaction, like, wow, like talking to Melvin Gordon, did you see that? Like that's just kind of crazy. And I think that a lot of it too, I mean, you're getting a chance to see some really nice misdirection with the screen game used with Williams getting him out in space. He hasn't been much up the middle or between the tackles. I think that's where they miss Ware, but they haven't needed him there. So they're really forcing that pass rush to kind of to bite on Mahomes and be able to throw the screen game, get out in space and let that 4.4 speed do its action. So it's nice there. And even Darrell Williams, the LSU guy, and I know you like LSU back, Cecil.
Right. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, remember?
Yeah, sweet feet, big guy, underrated. So he's getting a chance, and they kept him this whole year, even though he was their fourth back on the depth chart. That's telling.
It is telling. So always fun this time of year, right? Because we're going to talk about the backups and a couple of them tonight: Damian Williams, Justin Jackson, etc. Dr. Gene, I hate to start off like this, but the Carson Wentz situation. What do we know? What's the outlook? Dynasty format, long term? Like, what's going on with his back?
I don't think we know a ton yet. We're hearing that there's a fracture in the vertebrae, and that could mean lots of different things. On one hand, they're considering allowing him to play if they decide that he can't do any extra damage. But on the other hand, this has been going on for 5 to 6 weeks, and we've had quarterbacks that have had transverse process fractures, Cam Newton and Derek Carr and Tony Romo, and they've been back within 2 weeks and not struggled all that much. So it seems less likely that it's something like that and more likely something that could be a little bit more concerning. So it stands to reason that they're likely to hold him out at least a week and see how things go. If we do hear that it's something a little bit more concerning, and there doesn't seem to be any indication of that right now, maybe the healing process is something that becomes a concern through the off season. But that plus, I think there were off and on times where he felt like he was not fully, but it progressed far enough after the knee injury where he was looking a little bit more like his usual self. But between some of the issues that they're having injury-wise on the offensive line, struggles on defense, how likely are they to win these last few games and garner a playoff spot is hard to know. Not that they're looking at those things necessarily to shut Carson Wentz down, but that's all part of the calculus and how this goes. So I think we'll get a little bit more information through the weekend, maybe on the other side of the weekend, Sunday, Monday, about how things are going here. I don't think I'd get too bogged down in those rumors about, was he informed of his condition, that sort of stuff. I don't know that there's anything really going on there. It's just going to be interesting to find out whether or not it's one of the more minor types of back fractures or something else that's going to take a little bit more time to heal and could limit him this offseason.
Only in football do you hear the phrase minor back fracture. Gene, it seemed like it was a minor thigh bruise for Odell Beckham. Are we going to see him this weekend?
I don't know what to think about Beckham. He talked to the media today and pretty much acknowledged that his leg wasn't right. And there's some reason that they chose. Pat Shermer was trying to minimize things and say, we're just being cautious. We're just comparing these scans to the previous scans. That was the suggestion. But the fact that he didn't even travel with the team last Saturday, now after a middle of the week practice, getting an extra opinion outside the facility, all these things are concerning. I don't know that we have to deem him doubtful, but you'd certainly like to see him get some sort of practice and reassuring statements to the media after tomorrow's practice on Friday for us to feel pretty good about him. I think I'd lean. I don't know which way I'd lean. I think I'd definitely consider him questionable, and the fact that he didn't play last week is certainly concerning.
Stop me if you've heard this before about Cam Newton, but it just seems like, the injury report for Cam Newton are things like fell out of a B-2 bomber, careened off the Sears Tower, bounced off a Sherman tank, and was run over by a gas truck, and he's probable to play. The question is there any chance with that shoulder that's going to heal up enough for him to not look as limited as he did as a thrower this season?
I don't think so. I think the last couple of weeks they've really limited his practice repetitions, and it hasn't made him more likely to throw the ball downfield more effectively than he has. They were limiting his practice reps and weren't willing to allow him to throw a Hail Mary, and that's not the first time in the last couple of years that's happened. There was some suggestion that he might be considering off-season surgery if it comes to that. And they're still limiting him in practice this week. I did get back to a full practice today, which is a little bit more on the reassuring side, but we're still waiting to see Newton, until he's fully off the injury report and they're not limiting him throwing at all, then there's some concern that he's not going to be able to do the same on Sunday.
Audible Live here, going around with Dr. Jene Bramel. And why did Mike Tomlin have to say James Conner doesn't need to practice to play? What's your opinion on James Conner? I personally don't think he's going to play, but yet they keep going on. I think it was Monday when he was like, James Conner could play this week. And then the report today was like, he doesn't need to practice to play. Kind of like it if he did, and I don't think he's going to play. Dr. Gene, how about you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's accurate. He doesn't have to practice to play. However, that's not what the Steelers do. If their players don't practice on Wednesday and Thursday, they rarely do anything on Friday, and it's even less likely that they're going to play. So, we saw some Instagram videos of James Conner dancing around a jacuzzi and things like that. But he was ruled out within 48 hours of the injury last week. Wasn't, just plain not going to practice, not going to play. And that suggests that you're looking at a 3 to 4 week injury. And he himself finally confirmed that to be the high ankle sprain that we all suspected early after the injury last week. So knowing that the injury was confirmed to be a high ankle sprain, knowing that he's not been cleared to practice at any point until now, and that they ruled him out so early last week, pretty strongly suggests that this is in the mid-grade side of things, and it's going to be close to 4 weeks before he's ready to recover. Jalen Samuels played well last week. And so they know they've got another option there if they need to. It's a very important game against New England, but if he's not ready, he's not ready. So I think Tomlin sort of left the door open for Conner to come back and practice and do a little bit more and maybe be listed questionable, but he's got to be on the practice field. And generally speaking, when the Steelers don't put players in practice on Wednesday and Thursday, that's what happens. They don't go on Friday. They're listed doubtful or worse and then ruled out before the game. So I think there's every expectation that's what's going to happen with Conner, and you cross your fingers that he'll be back for week 16.
Gene, another quarterback with back issue, Matthew Stafford, who had to postpone his usual media availability today to get treatment on his back. What can we read into that for his availability? But maybe even more important than that, his quality of play, level of play, if he does go in the cold against Buffalo.
Yeah, I think he's going to play. I suppose it's possible that Stafford becomes one of these players towards the end of the year where we find out that he's been playing similar to Carson Wentz with something that's really been more limiting than just a little bit of back spasm. And we're going on close to a month now that Stafford has been fighting through this, and eventually he gets shut down. But that doesn't seem likely to happen. Stafford is not usually in that category of player. It is a little bit concerning that he left practice this week for a little bit of therapy and treatment, but I think you'd expect him to play. And, the more important question that you asked there is how effective is he going to be? Really hasn't been effective these last couple of weeks, and there's nothing to suggest that he will be soon. And that goes along with there's some offensive line issues there. Kerryon Johnson is very unlikely to come back this year at this point. Kenny Golladay really hasn't been himself since that quad injury, even though he's not on the injury report, fighting with issues at tight end and otherwise. Just a not good situation at all for the Lions offense. So I think Stafford's going to play, but I don't think he's got a ton of upside.
Well, Gene, Austin Hooper's been pretty good this year, but it looks like that injury is pretty bad. So is he going to play at all?
I don't think he's going to play this week. I think the Falcons tried to minimize that injury by saying it wasn't a long-term thing, but that in no way meant that he was going to play this week. I went back and looked at the video of that injury today, and I'm not certain what, there was a little bit of one of those kind of high ankle MCL type mechanisms, but he reached for the outside of his knee. So it just makes you wonder what's going on there and whether or not he's going to be able to recover and play this year. Didn't practice on Wednesday, didn't practice today on Thursday. I think it's very unlikely that he'll go, kind of expecting to see another DNP on Friday and probably to be declared out early. And there's always room for a Friday surprise, but I don't think that's likely to be the case. And I think it's more likely that he plays in week 17 than he does in week 16 at this point. But depending on where the Falcons are, it's another one of those situations where there's probably no reason to risk recurrent injury or otherwise if he's not fully ready to go. So I think he's going to be inactive this week.
Friday surprise, much different than the wild turkey surprise that Tasmanian Devil used to talk about on Looney Tunes. A toast to you all out there as we continue the rounds. Dr. Gene, it is a Broncos show. Why hasn't Cortland Sutton looked good? We're going to get into that. By the way, Matt, we're going to talk about the circle of life because I think on Saturday the Browns are going to pound the Broncos. And that'll make you happy, brother. I know that. So we're going to talk about the Browns in that game, of course.
Oh, they're hungry.
2 Saturday games. Yeah, exactly. And they've got their Elway. And the Broncos have Case Keenum. But Dr. Gene, just take us through a quad injury. The thigh bruise, basically, is what Cortland Sutton has. Yet in the last game, after a 4 for 85 and a touchdown performance, in the last game, he had a couple catches for 14 yards. So take us through that injury and how it can kind of bother or link. I mean, it's a deep thigh bruise. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. So a bruise is bleeding somewhere. So usually you just get a little bruise on the skin. You got some bleeding underneath there. It stops. It's not that big a deal. But when you get a bruise within the muscle belly, sometimes there's a lot of bleeding in there before there's enough pressure from it's the muscle that kind of puts pressure on itself to stop the bleeding, and you get some bleeding in there. And depending on how much it is or where it is, it can be stretching the muscle and causing some pain. It can go along with a little bit of a strained muscle at the same time. The body does not like blood outside its blood vessels, so sometimes it can get really painful. It can resorb more slowly than you'd expect, and it's an area where even if it isn't quote unquote a strain necessarily, it still limits the player and what they need to do. And quad muscles are important. Any leg muscle is important for a wide receiver, but a quad muscle extends the leg, so explosion off the line, slowing down and dipping into your brakes and sinking your hips. Although this isn't necessarily a hip injury, you're putting a lot of pressure on the quad to slow yourself down there. And it's an injury that can cause some muscle spasm. It's an injury that can stiffen up and cause lots of pain. So it's likely what Odell Beckham is dealing with. He told reporters today, Beckham did, that you can call it whatever you want, a contusion or other, kind of a potato type thing. And Marquise Goodwin missed a couple of games with something similar to this earlier this year. Just not a good injury to have. So the hope is that with some treatment that they can get that blood to settle down a little bit, the muscle issues to settle down, and have him warmed up and ready to go where he won't have any limitation this week. But these are things that it's really hard to rehab. You just have to wait on them to heal.
Gene, who has better endurance to keep coming at you, the T1000 or Matt Breida?
I think we have to go with the T1000. Matt Breida finally tapped out. Well, he probably didn't tap out. I think the Niners just sort of shut him down last week. He's back to a limited practice, but there doesn't seem to be as much optimism around Breida this week as there was in previous weeks. He's still said to be limited. They're not sure if they're going to let him go or not. There's a little bit of suggestion in the local media that the team may want to get a little bit longer look at Jeff Wilson. And sometimes, whereas the national media members will come out and say things fairly straight up, the local media members are trying to keep an in with their more local sources, and they'll say things that just look sort of like they're just speculating. but they're speculating with knowledge. And so when you hear that, when you really haven't heard it in the past, it just makes you wonder if whether or not, at minimum, Breida is going to be much more limited than he has been in previous weeks if he is active. And it's a tough injury to play through. It's amazing that he's played through it as long as it has. And one of the other things we talk about pretty regularly is once a player has missed one game and has decided that it's just best to rest the injury, it makes it a lot easier to wait until they're closer to full strength than it was when they were just trying to play through the injury in the first place. So the fact that he's missed 1 week makes it a little bit more likely that he misses some additional time to finally allow it to get close to full strength as possible.
Gene, tell me that there's going to be some good news Sunday for Dante Pettis.
Yeah, I'm not. I was trying to remember, and I did a little bit of searching. And I didn't get there. Did Dante Pettis have a foot injury in college? Do you remember?
I
don't know if I'm getting confused about that or not. I couldn't find any.
Washington receivers, it's like they're always banged up because I'm thinking of John Ross, but I think Pettis might have. I can dig that up real quick.
I don't know why that just popped into my head when I saw him on the injury report with a foot injury. Earlier this year, it was an MCL. It was a knee sprain that limited him a little bit. So you never like midweek injuries. Foot, it's just hard to know whether or not this was just a little bit of, where they just put something on the injury report as to get him in there for a day, just a maintenance day, or whether or not this was something going on. So I need to do a little bit more specific searching back through his college days to see if there was something there. It may be just something I hallucinated and it stuck in my head pretty quickly there. Thinking about Sammy Watkins and so many of the other players this year that have been dealing with chronic foot issues. So I'm not too concerned about him just yet. There wasn't anything in the local media that suggested that this was a big deal, but Friday practice participation in his game status report will kind of tell the tale on him.
What about Adrian Peterson in the shoulder? I mean, the matchup's already terrible, and you should probably think of him as a running back 3 or deep flex, but a concern with a bruising back like that to have a shoulder injury.
The deal with Peterson is he's missing more practice now than he was a month ago. They would rest him on Wednesday, planned, and then get him back to a full practice pretty quickly. That's really not been the case the last couple of weeks, and it's not the case this week either. Still limited in a Thursday practice. But I think you're right. It's definitely an issue for a running back, and a running back that likes to lower the shoulder and run with power. But I think the Washington issue is the offensive line. They do have Trent Williams and Morgan Moses coming back, but the interior of that offensive line is struggling. Center is still fighting through injuries. They're just not themselves. The offense under Colt McCoy was a little bit different, and now under Mark Sanchez, very much different than what we had with Alex Smith as well. So I think there's multiple issues more than just the shoulder injury that might be limiting Peterson.
By the way, Dr. Gene, super quick, just my notes on Pettis were left ankle injury November 2017 that hampered him down the stretch.
Okay.
That's all I got. No foot, just a left ankle injury.
Okay.
Gene, looking at offensive line injuries, Indianapolis and the pivot, Ryan Kelly, we're going to get to see him in a huge game for them against Dallas, and they're very strong front four.
Yeah, he's trending positively. I think he wants to play, but as we saw with Teron Armstead last week and so many other offensive linemen, you see that they like to play, but sometimes they just get held out, even if the trend looks like it's positive. So he needs to be back on the practice field on Friday. Hopefully we'll get something more positive than a questionable listing, but I think this is his first realistic chance to play. And if he goes, you would think that means that he's healthy enough to really protect Andrew Luck. Hopefully that's what we'll see.
Any concerns about DeAndre Hopkins' foot injury?
No, and we're still kind of waiting on. I think Kiki Kuti's a little bit more likely to play this week, still considering a game time decision than he was last week. Hopkins is where he always is, limited in practice, not listed on the game status report, should be good to go.
It is the Audible Live here each and every Thursday night right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Thank you very much for listening on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, any way that you take in your podcast. And thank you for commenting and rating our podcast as well on iTunes. Some of the comments are pretty funny. Anyway, let's do one more round for you, Dr. Gene. Certainly appreciate your time, brother. And we will jump back in with the Kerryon Johnson question. And just how long is it still going to take? Been from week 11 till now. Looks like a fourth game going to be missed for Kerryon Johnson. More LeGarrette Blount, Zach Zinner
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
When's Johnson coming back?
I don't know that he's coming back this year. As we talked about last week, you get past that 2-week injury, then it starts to look like a 3 to 4 week situation. And if you're not practicing within 4 weeks, then it's likely a 4 to 6 week deal. The Lions are going nowhere this year. There's no sense in putting him out there at less than full strength. Still not practicing into Thursday, so it's going to be a fourth game. And every rep matters, so to speak. But you have to balance the risks and benefits of playing time with risk of injury and maybe missing some off-season time. So I think there's a good argument that having him fully available for off-season training activities makes more sense than the risk of aggravating a knee injury, which may or may not be likely, or suffering some sort of compensatory situation. So they haven't put him on injured reserve yet, which suggests that they think he's still got a chance to come back this year, but certainly not this week. And then you have to wonder what's going to happen after that.
Gene, how much do those X-ray machines in the stadiums cost, and can we make a collection so that Oakland will have one if the Steelers have to play there again?
No, I think that's the quaint Oakland deal right now, right? Playing on a baseball field, you have to go find an X-ray machine that may or may not work. Take up a collection if you like, but it's the ghost. What'd you say? The ghost of Al Davis?
Ghost of Al Davis, yeah.
Well, then I guess we'll follow this up and say, will Ben Roethlisberger be crying in a corner in the dark?
It might be dark in the X-ray room. It's hard to know. Nah, he's going to play. I don't know that there's too much going on there. Was able to come back, and he looked fine in the fourth quarter last week. It's a painful injury. He'll probably be padded up a little bit more. But Roethlisberger plays with players hanging all off, pass rushers hanging off him all the time anyway. I expect that to be the case again this week.
Rib pass rusher. What's the difference, right? Yeah.
Right. It's fine. It's all drama when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger. Am I right, fellas? I mean, that's what it is here with this guy, Dr. Jene Bramel. He's the man. You follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. You check out his Second Opinion blog on footballguys.com. Dr. Jene, appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, boys. Enjoy the week.
Yeah.
Will do. Bloom, let's get a game update.
Well, the Chargers got another stop, and they also, previously to that, had a nice drive. Tyrell Williams had a good catch. We were seeing Detrez Newsome getting some good touches in there, along with Justin Jackson. And it's the Mike Williams coming out party tonight as he scored on a rushing attempt. And now the Chargers have the ball as we're winding down the third quarter, and they have a chance to pull into a tie. And I suppose that game against the Steelers a few weeks ago really got them ready for this primetime game, getting snowed under early in a game, but maintaining your composure. And there's so much on the line in this game, and we're about to see a pretty dramatic fourth quarter.
This highlight how ignorant I am, because I told you guys before the show, I was like, my voice is going. I wish I had a little whiskey. And then I was like, but I'm drinking Crown. Crown is whiskey.
Canadian whiskey.
Yeah, Canadian whiskey, Anyway, Matt, as I get sauced here, let's talk about what the Browns could do this week and just exactly how they go about it with Nick Chubb, with Jarvis Landry being utilized more as a receiver. Fantastic what you do when you get rid of Hugh Jackson. And, of course, Baker the Baby Maker, because I think this is very fitting from a historical angle. You had the Broncos and John Elway kind of in some runs, like emphasize some serious runs the Browns could have made back in the 80s. Well, it's come around full circle, and it's taken it some time and another team because of Pet Cemetery rule, but the Browns are back. It seems like they could be a little extra motivated, not by Elway or anything like that, but by a quarterback who wakes up and feels dangerous every day, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I mean, he's been playing great, and I'll say this just on behalf of Browns fans everywhere. I know that none of us would accept John Elway anywhere near our city, or anyone who would be our John Elway, but as great as he was. But, we're a little spiteful about him. So, right. But I will say that, but Mayfield on that level absolutely has been playing very well, and we should owe really a lot should be owed to Freddie Kitchens. I mean, this is a guy that should get a real opportunity to maintain his job as the offensive coordinator for the Browns. They've done an excellent job of making things simple for Baker Mayfield, allowing him to really just get rid of the ball quickly. And then when the pocket gets compromised, then he's able to do some things that he's always done well in his college career, which is to be able to create on the move, throwing the ball to the open guy, showing some excellent accuracy downfield. And then they've been creative in the red zone, which has helped out a lot when it comes to, why Baker Mayfield and Drew Brees have the best quarterback rating in the red zone this year. And a lot of that just has to do with, just smart play calling in terms of misdirection and incorporating some things that aren't just your usual kind of fare and predictive fare that was the case with the Browns earlier in the year.
Bloom, I'm going to have you break the tie because the chat room is reacting to me. And also our man UC700 asking, should I go Lindsey or Chubb? And what's interesting about this, Bloom, is last week at the Army-Navy game, and thank you guys as always for covering, but last week at the Army-Navy game, I got a chance to talk to Tiki Barber. And I asked if guys like Philip Lindsay, Christian McCaffrey, these sort of satellite backs that are making tremendous plays in the NFL, is it going to change the scouting world? He's too small, can't take the beating. Well, all right, feed them the rock, they'll make plays. And what you have in Nick Chubb is the more traditional, well-rounded vision, power, speed type of back. And what you have with Philip Lindsay is quickness, speed, not the size, but certainly playmaking ability. So in a PPR, UC700 wants to know Lindsay or Chubb.
Yeah, I don't really have to think about this very long. It's Chubb. I just looking at the trends, Chubb is scoring in every game. He's being involved in the passing game to the same extent, if not slightly more than Philip Lindsay on average over, say, the last month. And I think the most important thing looking at this one is just the trends with the two teams coming in. And the Broncos, and Broncos are, you could speak to this more than I can, of course, they're a better team at home. But I think that they're kind of dragging themselves into this one. I think the Browns are playing with that. Speaking of the 49ers, the same thing we saw in the 49ers down the stretch last year. This is lightness. There are a lot of teams that are dragging themselves to the finish, even some of the teams in the playoff race, most of the teams for the 6th seed in the NFC, for the example, just playing some of their worst football. But we saw this with San Francisco last year in December when they found their quarterback. Sound familiar? Jimmy Garoppolo. And they were one of the best, 10 teams in the NFL. They were playing at a playoff level in December last year. And I think that, we're not seeing this in every game for the Browns, but certainly we saw it against Carolina. I think we saw it whenever they beat the Bengals so badly that the Bengals did some soul searching as an organization, which is going to just end up with Hugh Jackson being the next head coach. But that's a whole other thing, So I just think what you really want is the running back that's going to have the game script behind them in this one. And even though the game is at Denver, I feel like the trends, the momentum for these teams favor the Browns. So I'd go with Chubb.
You have 7 touchdowns in 5 games for Chubb. You have 6 touchdowns in 4 games for Lindsay. So going to be very, very interesting to see how that one goes. And you really can't go wrong either way. So here we go. Here, Bloom, super quick, from what Barber said.
Yeah.
Does the scouting community change when they look at backs like Philip Lindsay?
Well, I think they already should have changed. And I think I don't want to go off on this tangent for too long, but I think that with college offenses being more like pro offenses, or the two merging, they're undersized players in general. We're watching Tyreek Hill out there tonight. A guy like Taylor Gabriel all of a sudden is popping more than he did before. Jakeem Grant, I think a lot of these players that were undersized with the field spread out more are going to be more effective, and they'll find more uses for them. So absolutely, I think that the thresholds of players, again, I mean, really your shorthand way to look at this are, that classic player who was such a playmaker and so explosive and so valuable in college, but we thought, well, he's a college player.
Right.
The returner / running back / wide receiver, those players are going to have more of a place in the NFL, and undersized running backs are going to have more of a place in the NFL, because it's like when you look at the Rams offense, and you're running 3 wide all the time, and you're facing 6 in the box. Of course, undersized running backs, the knock on undersized running back would be that punishment and running between the tackles. It's not as important anymore in the NFL.
Matt, super quick, because I've got plenty of other topics, but Marquise Brown, is that like the next Tyreek Hill? 75, 13, 18, and 10 touchdowns for Boomer Sooner this year. 5'10", $168, and can fly. Also mocked in Todd McShay's first mock draft to the Denver Broncos. So I've been thinking and contemplating Marquise Brown. We'll get into plenty of this draft talk. So just super quick, Matt, you like Brown? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Any quick thoughts?
Yeah, I do like him. He's extremely explosive, and he gives you an opportunity to deliver probably what is Azahir Hakeem probably would have done in this era. So I think that's a pretty nice endorsement right there.
Wow. And I'd love to go back and think of quarterbacks can make it or be different in this era. And certainly guys like Azeem would be different in this era as well. The Audible Live here on our YouTube channel, we're talking about a bump. I think there's going to be a bump for the Vikings, Matt. And I think there's going to be a big bump for Dalvin Cook. Do you agree this week, especially against the Dolphins, who have allowed the 4th most rushing yards in the NFL this season? Is Dalvin Cook someone who could have this big bump with the replacement of the Vikings offensive coordinator? People say it's Cousins and look out. And well, yeah, Cousins, there'll be a bump there. But I think Dalvin Cook could get a big bump. What do you think?
I think it could be. I think there's a reasonable expectation for that. I am a little worried about Minnesota because I think Miami's been playing pretty well as of late, and at least have feeling pretty good about what's been going on in recent weeks. So I wonder about Kirk Cousins and whether or not he's actually going to get a bump, and if he ends up getting kind of run over some more, then what we may see is that Cook is out of a game script. So I'm a little more boom bust on Cook, but I understand the rationale very much. And Miami, it's not like their defense has suddenly changed. It's just that the team as a whole has been playing a little bit better, and that does benefit the defense somewhat when the offense has been playing well and staying in games.
Bloom, where do you come down on a Vikings bump? And by the way, I don't think Xavier Howard's going to play. Do we have an update on that?
No.
And do you think there will be a Vikings bump without DeFilippo?
I don't think there'll be much of a bump. I do think there will be a different emphasis in the game plan. And I think this is one of those situations where whether it's a philosophical difference or Zimmer is pushing someone else in front of the bus before it's him, you are going to see, and I think it just makes sense from a basic philosophical standpoint to attack Miami on the ground. So I would expect it to be more Dalvin Cook, more Latavius Murray. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a game plan not that much different than what the Vikings did with Case Keenum last year. Maybe throw the ball 25 times, 28 times, try to run the ball 30 times, 35 times. You may see Latavius Murray get 15 carries in this one, and Dalvin Cook still get his full complement of carries. And I would expect there to be a different offensive blueprint in one of those situations where it comes from the head coach on down, that this is what we want to emphasize. This is how we got close last year, and we aren't close right now. And Kirk Cousins, and obviously this is a referendum against Kirk Cousins. Putting the offense on Kirk Cousins' shoulders has been disastrous. And they faced 2 playoff teams the last 2 weeks, and Kirk Cousins was nowhere near keeping them in the game. So I think this is an equal and opposite reaction, pendulum swinging back kind of situation here. And it is a good week to have Dalvin Cook, who looks great. Dalvin Cook does have the fresh legs of a guy who didn't play for a good part of the season. He looks fantastic. So I think it's a good week to break ties if you're close in favor of Dalvin Cook.
Bloom,
Cecil?
shouldn't we have seen this coming? Yes, Matt, go ahead.
Just want to add, if you're, again, just as a note to you, that if you're ever in Minnesota again for any NFL events and you find yourself at a crosswalk next to Mike Zimmer, back 2 steps away from him.
It's a little slick out there in the Minnesota way. And let's continue this conversation because I think it's fascinating, Bloom. And our man, Mike Tanier. And my God, 2 of my favorite writers. One I'm talking to, Matt Waldman, and the other one, Mike Tanier. I mean, Jesus, this guy. He comes out with a report, I think it was yesterday or today, about quarterbacks. And it was about Alex Smith, Case Keenum, and Kirk Cousins. And he simply put, paying an average quarterback doesn't make him better. Yeah. So, and 4-24, we go through all the numbers, right? And never won a playoff game, and we go through it all. But shouldn't we have known this about Kirk Cousins? Case Keenum's a different story, right? I mean, you shouldn't have been expecting that guy to continue, although the Broncos were, and I've got some information on that. They were expecting him to continue to ascend, and he can't, dude. He can't. But shouldn't we have also seen that with Cousins?
Sure, we should have. But look, what was the curve? What was the grading curve for Kirk Cousins this year? Better than Case Keenum.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but better than Case Keenum. Elevating the offense. Basically, what the Vikings felt like was, well, we have a lot of pieces in place, And the one piece we didn't feel we had was a quarterback. You could tell Mike Zimmer was never in on Case Keenum. And the offseason to-do list was get the best quarterback out there. Well, he was the best quarterback out there. It doesn't just even as much of an underachiever he's been compared to expectations, or even some expectations that were set earlier this year. Kirk Cousins was still probably the best quarterback. I mean, better than Sam Bradford, better than Case Keenum, better than trading for Nick Foles. So they did the best they could. And even the fully guaranteed contract wasn't some massive endorsement of Kirk Cousins. It was just showing you where the quarterback salary market is going. And I get it. Paying, I think what we need to do with quarterback salaries now is just shave like 18 million off the top, right? so it's like what you're paying the quarterback is how much over 18 million you pay them, because any starting quarterback is going to get 18 million now. Anybody, Nick Foles is going to get 18 million a year next year. Maybe it's going to be like the Colin Kaepernick, Andy Dalton structure, where it's like 18 million this year, and then we decide if it's 18 million next year, and so on. But that's what a starting quarterback gets now, $18 million a year. And because there's not 32 starting quarterbacks, if you're the 30th ranked quarterback, you're going to get, if the Giants release Eli Manning and the Jags decide he's their starting quarterback, he's going to get probably 15, 18, $20 million for next year from them. That's just the quarterback pay scale. So I don't think we should look at Kirk Cousins and what, the fully guaranteed contract, I think, was maybe the good thing to take out of this year for players, where how the things have gone with Le'Veon Bell may not have gone well, at least for running backs. And I agree that we shouldn't have expected Kirk Cousins to turn into the kind of quarterback that elevates a team. But I think what the Vikings were hoping was that he was the kind of quarterback that can at least harvest the value that's there in Adam Thielen, in Stephon Diggs, in Dalvin Cook. Some of this could be the offensive line. Now, we remember earlier in the year that he was making a lot of plays, a lot of throws under pressure, a lot of low percentage throws that he was converting. So I think that he was actually making plays that Case Keenum wasn't going to be able to make. But I think we can also see that just the way the NFL changes, the Rams took a big step forward without paying $84 million to a quarterback. The Saints took a step forward without making any major changes to their blueprint or big splashy moves. And the Vikings basically tread water, and that ain't enough.
And Bloom, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and especially when you say like their plan was to go get the best quarterback out there. Matt, why wasn't that Teddy Bridgewater? Guy that was already there.
That's the big question, because really there probably was just concern about getting injured again, and maybe they just didn't want to do that. And that's what I hoped was the reason, because there's two trains of thought with Kirk Cousins. The first train of thought is just like, Dan Hatman and I had this conversation this week about GMs and how there's very few GM retreads in the NFL. And that's because if you get fired as a GM and didn't do a good job, you're basically banished, as if, I just watched Tyreek Hill have a ball bounce off his helmet in the end zone, but that kind of tripped me up there. But if you have a situation where you didn't do well and you made mistakes, you're kind of banished from ever having opportunity again, which is kind of silly when you really think about it, because in the NFL and a performance business, oftentimes there are a lot of constraints on what you can do. And on top of that, when you do make a mistake, you usually have the most opportunity to grow from your mistakes if you get another chance. But the NFL doesn't allow that. Same thing but with quarterbacks, it's interesting though, because you can look at that train of thought and say, well, maybe they were looking at Kirk Cousins saying, the growth that he's had to a certain extent, he's become a better player over the years. When we were here 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, talking about him and throwing crazy interceptions left and right at Washington early in his career, and then even later on, and then he started to look better and better, but then the team kind of being like good riddance when he left. There's a part of it say, well, give him room to grow. And maybe that's what they're going to hope for here. But the other end of the spectrum, you can look at it and say, which is what I more tend to believe, is he never really had it. He's kind of Mr. Congeniality of the media. He was before he started, some of the strangeness started to come out a little bit more. But in college, he was that blonde haired, curly locked guy who just basically looked like he was like the
the prized guest on the banquet circuit, like that, college broadcasters drooled over him and swooned, and they thought that he'd be the next pitch man and good guy. And I think that teams buy into that from a leadership angle, and the Big Ten, played in the Big Ten and put up good stats and that kind of thing. But what's missing from his game is kind of that glue that makes, that kind of ties together the physical and the conceptual and the intellectual and the emotional aspects of being a leader, as well as being someone who executes well on the field. And for some reason, not all of that comes together with Kirk Cousins very well. And expecting that to somehow happen with the word experience is just, I think that whole experience rationale is the most expensive and money wasting type of thing for signing contracts as big as what Kirk Cousins has gotten. Even though, as Bloom mentioned, it's not that huge, but to me, I mean, Eli Manning, if he went to the Jaguars, if we're going to say 18 million is the baseline, we can go plus whatever, minus whatever, he should be at like -9, for the 18 million, as opposed to within plus or minus 3 to 5 million.
Since 1979, this is a number brought up from a man, Mike Pritchard. Make sure to listen to Pritchard and Cecil on The Fan every day, Monday through Friday. Since 1979, by his count, there's been 9 quarterbacks that have been second round or later that have turned into franchise guys. And by the way, he also included players like Mark Rippon and Neil O'Donnell. So I pushed him on that because Neil O'Donnell. You mean the guy that allegedly threw the Super Bowl? Anyway, Bloom's always bitter Steelers fans. By the way, Sean Hickey, our man in the chat room reacting, says, can someone check Sig's hippie card? He never, ever begins or ends a sentence with man, asking for the dude.
Man, I guess, yeah, let's just say
it's
that
the lawyer in you, man. That's what it is.
Right.
And when you say it's the lawyer in me, what it is the idea that I know on some level that I'm projecting out to people right now, but in a different setting, I'm sure that I would hippify or otherwise wax, rhapsodic and philosophical. So what were we talking about? There's one for you.
The crunchy
Guaranteed.
factor is high.
Yes, very crunchy. Ask these guys.
Hey, it's all right.
Guaranteed.
What was I supposed to? Was I supposed to answer something else?
Something to toast or smoke a beady too, right? Sorry, Joe. Anyway, we're all adults here. How about a game update, Bloom? Let's do that.
Yeah, the Kansas City's driving, as Matt pointed out. Tyreek Williams had an easy touchdown, long touchdown bounce off of his helmet. Demarcus Robinson was running with him with his arms in the air. So Demarcus Robinson, congratulations for blooming Tyreek Hill and all the Tyreek Hill fantasy teams out there. Travis Kelce is compiling some catches and yards. Usually the last 4 games, I think, against the Chargers, he's come up really small, so he's starting to come through. And the clock is just, I hate to channel Chris Berman, but there was a time back in the 80s that Chris Berman was actually, he had some cool value or some
for sure,
but you can feel it, the tick 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 with the Chargers, and too many opportunities that they've let go. And I know we've seen the Chargers taking care of business against bad teams in a way that they haven't in the past. I know we saw the Chargers win the kind of game that they lose against the Steelers, and there were a few others like that, like the one against the Titans. But this feels more like, you want to know if the Chargers can measure up to the best. These are the kinds of things that are going to happen. And it's a shame because I think we're seeing Philip Rivers' legacy, on a different team, in a different situation. If he had won a Super Bowl or 2, he would be there with the best names of this generation of quarterbacks. But because of this, which isn't totally on him, we're not going to consider him there. And this is the kind of game that just makes me feel like, as good as this team is, with the defense they have, with the talent that they have, although we got to check on this Keenan Allen hip injury, there's still, it's not quite the same thing as Kirk Cousins. It's nothing remotely like that short, but you're just waiting. I mean, poor Philip Rivers. I mean, he went out and played in the playoffs with a torn ACL. So I guess really I should just say he deserves to be remembered better than he probably will, because he won't even get to a Super Bowl in his career.
Like Marty Schottenheimer.
Yeah, exactly like Marty Schottenheimer. My God.
And there's that iconic loss to the Patriots. It was I remember watching that game. I was waiting for you to get to Houston for the Shrine game that year.
Right. Some good stories here on the Audible Live. By the way, Bloom, our listeners want to know just how hurt is Cam Newton?
What, me?
You.
How hurt is he?
Yeah, and how
He's
much
not-
do you trust him?
I don't trust him. He's not pushing the ball downfield. It's good if you have Ian Thomas, but he's not pushing the ball downfield, and it's taking away an element to this offense that is crucial. You're also seeing some play calling, and there was some time in the red zone last week against Cleveland where they had that disease, the Starkeesian disease, where you're making it so difficult on yourself to score a touchdown. There's so many easier ways to score a touchdown, but I have Cam Newton as my number 12 quarterback this week. So, he's at the bottom of that quarterback 1 tier, but I'm playing guys like Mitchell Trubisky and Lamar Jackson over him. Even with the Drew Brees floor games coming in on the other side of that game, I'm playing Drew Brees over him. So, I'm not pushing him down. Aaron Rodgers, the two quarterbacks I'm sticking my neck out to say bench this week are Aaron Rodgers and Jameis Winston. And I just feel like at this point, Rodgers and Winston, at least in the second half last week, haven't done the last time we saw them enough to have a lot of confidence in them to overcome playing one of the best defenses in the league on the road. So those are the two quarterbacks that I would say that it might seem crazy to play Marcus Mariota or Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen over somebody you drafted to be your every week starter. But in those cases, I think you gotta.
Well, and that's the thing. Like the Marcy Rossman rule has been kind of brutal this year. Drew Brees specifically. Hello, Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara. All right, but and there are certain guys you stick with. I'm sticking with Brees again. Newton or Luck. I'm taking Luck this week. I am benching Cam Newton, even for Josh Allen. Matt, your thoughts on putting one of those guys, and let's throw in Aaron Rodgers in this mix too. So Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton may be benched for guys like Josh Allen, like Marcus Mariota. And sticking with Brees and Luck this week.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't bench Rodgers, but I certainly understand benching Newton. And when you can get, a Cordell Stewart, Michael Vick, Tyrod Taylor type of runner and Josh Allen, then, you take advantage of that, and he's certainly been able to, be an explosive playmaker with his legs and occasionally throw the ball too. So, he's someone that's kind of sneaky good in that realm, even if, he needs a lot more help, remedially in terms of reading defenses beyond, just maybe, safeties, rotating and just first reads. But, the Bills are doing a very good job with a guy like Allen to maximize the talents that he has. So I'm actually, I can certainly see why people would consider him over a guy like Newton, who's not all that healthy.
Bloom, is Lamar Jackson on a shorter leash this week because Joe Flacco's been cleared from the hip?
No, I would say just the opposite, actually. I would say,
really?
I think at this point, well, and maybe I'm being overly simplistic here, I think that you make this decision for good. I don't think I think that if you had in your mind to go back to the Joe Flacco blueprint, then this is your time to do it. And if you've decided this is a better team and a better offense with Lamar Jackson, then you go forward with that. But I think you've crossed the Rubicon here. And the idea is if you're acknowledging that Joe Flacco is healthy enough to play and he's not the starter, you're endorsing Lamar Jackson. And I think the last thing you would want to do, and this is assumption of rational coaching. So again, and John Harbaugh, I think, has earned at least the benefit of the doubt when it comes to rational coaching. And Matt, you can, and I'll toss the baton to you on this, but I think in this moment, the worst thing you could do is convey to Lamar Jackson that he's on a short leash and have him playing too cautious or too scared. I think this is the moment when you say, spread your wings, young man. This is your team now. Show us what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that the offenses are very different at this point, and Joe Flacco can't run the same offense that Lamar Jackson's running right now because he doesn't, as much as he was mobile in, at Delaware, he was more of a Josh Allen type and not even quite as mobile as Josh Allen was. So you're looking at, more of a drop back game with him, the way that the Bills use Josh Allen, which is, play action fakes and rollouts, quarterback draws, oh, there's an opening after dropping back 3, 5, 7 steps and I can run in the middle of the field. Sure. But it's more about pass first, run second, or look like you're passing first, ignore your first read, and then run, which is kind of what you're seeing in the more Allen style, Flacco type of thing that would be there if he were running. But with with Lamar Jackson, it's more about run first and who's getting the ball, which freezes, the safeties and linebackers on the outside and allows these running backs to really get a lot of nice creases. And then if they pull the ball and keep it, it's going to be a throw. And then that also creates, bigger openings for the passing game in a way that a traditional play action drop back attack won't offer. So they'd have to revamp the entire offense and go back to what they were doing. And this team's already in a rhythm with what they're doing, and tempo and rhythm and good communication, and having all of that down is very important to be an aggressive, successful offense. You've got to have that tempo. And so if you're going to go back to the drawing board from several weeks ago, now suddenly you're going to have miscommunications, you're going to have hesitation, you're not going to have the tempo you want, and this offense is going to look bogged down.
I agree with what you guys are saying, but Bloom, I want to put you on the couch.
Yeah, please. Yeah, sure. Always.
Make this quick. And by the way, when you first joined this video call, I was like, "What are you wearing?" I didn't ask if you were wearing pants though, so I just leave the mystery. Leave the mystery.
Well, it was underwear, at least on long johns.
Okay.
So in between,
Holmes is on. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Moved. But I'm gonna press a little bit because I think it's very interesting. John Harbaugh, and you said rational coaching, so there's a drink. Our man K1 says that. K1 F8 says, "Hey, rational coaching, drink, Audible drinking game, cool." But John Harbaugh, still on the hot seat, regardless of how Baltimore's playing. And I don't think he should be, but that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, Lamar Jackson throws a pick. Is he benched?
No,
again, just make quick, baby.
No. And I think that...
Two picks.
No!
Oh, look at that.
I mean, I just think at this point you're saying by saying you're our starter, you're saying you're our starter. The same way that would Joe Flacco have got benched if he had 2 picks? I mean, I just think that this is Lamar Jackson's team now, or at least if John Harbaugh made this decision and that wasn't his intention, then he's missing the long view here, because this is about much more than 2018.
Bloom, let's get some final thoughts, because I can tell in the universe that it's not the crown speaking, but I can just tell, because I'm hearing from people today that I haven't heard from since like training camp, because it's like, I'm pressing, it's week 15.
Yeah.
So let's get some sage-like wisdom, brother, for our listeners before we sign off, and some final thoughts tonight.
Well, the sage-like wisdom, and Paul Charchian and I went on about 20 minutes overtime talking about this stuff, like don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid of making the wrong decision. Don't overthink it. Think long, think wrong. Don't try to talk yourself out of your decisions. We've seen Damian Williams get another touchdown here. So starting Damian Williams has been great. Not starting Justin Jackson has worked out. And starting, but there's still all this capriciousness and arbitrariness. You don't deserve to lose because you had Keenan Allen. It's just bad luck. And I think at this point, this is why a lot of the things that I say on the shows at this time of year, if I do radio spots at this time of year, is if you're still playing, you know what you're doing. And I want to help you make close calls. If you're on the fence between Derrick Henry and somebody else, chances are I'm going to tell you to play Derrick Henry because it's his time of year, something like that. But you trust yourself. You got yourself this far. And really, that's part of the fun. I mean, look, if I can do rationalizations, and I used to joke like Lucy had like psychiatric help 5 cents. I was going to do rationalizations 5 cents. Here's the rationalization: whether you win or lose, and in some ways, whether you win or lose is going to be based on the fantasy football gods and not your acumen or skill. Fantasy football is keeping you engaged. Football is keeping you engaged, and it's having some therapeutic value. That's the win right there. Mm-hmm. And then what you get beyond that in terms of championships and winnings and things like that, well, that's just the cherry on top of the sundae. And really, hopefully people can get this out of their fantasy leagues. Hopefully they can get something akin to what we get out of the camaraderie that we get with the show, out of the camaraderie that we get out of playing in leagues together every year. And that is even bigger, the win. It's the connections between human beings and the things we keep coming back to. Because as I'm about to leave Austin, and I'm last night I went out with two of my good friends who I've known for 18 years, and I think all the time that passed by that we could have been doing more things together. And I think that at least fantasy football keeps us in touch with each other. It keeps us in each other's lives in this way and gives us more opportunities. And that's really the win there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So much heavy stuff. Sorry, Joe. So much. I mean, it's true, man. It's like when we can share time with this community, it's fantastic. It's simply awesome. And we all have busy lives, every single one of us. Look through the changes that are going in each one of our lives, right? And dealing with that, dealing with moves, dealing with my son works for the Gunnison Police Department now, which still like blows my mind. Like, okay, things are moving, things are changing, but being together with fantasy football and knowing that we are all together, I think that's very important to note and to know that you have friends everywhere. We all bleed red, right? Color of our blood's the same. Matt Waldman, I'm getting a little crunchy and maybe a little sauced. Final thoughts, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys, and I definitely agree, from a fantasy angle with Bloom, that you should trust your own judgment first and foremost with this, because you're never going to learn if you don't trust your decisions. Because if you make a mistake, you're always going to be, or you succeed, you're either going to be attributing to another person or blaming another person. So one of the things that I like to do oftentimes when people ask me for advice about players and I know them reasonably well, I've gotten to know them over the years from them writing and asking weekly or every once in a while, is sometimes I will kind of pull this little routine where they'll ask me between two players, it's a tough decision, and I'll pick the player that I really don't believe in and just kind of give a little bit of a lame argument back and see if they fight me on it. And if they fight me on it, like they debate back, or they give a good rationale about the player, the opposite player, I know that they should be thinking for themselves, that shouldn't be taking my advice. And then I'll usually come back at them and say, you already have your answer. You just, I gave you a perfectly good, and it wasn't that lame a reason. It was just one where, I kind of give a rationale, and usually if someone fights me on it and debates, I'm like, you know who you want to start, and you've already given a reason for it. You should believe in that. You've been starting this guy all year, or you've been going, you've made this decision, you've made good decisions with this, and you're asking me now because it's a little bit more difficult, go for that, and usually that turns out to be the right pick because they've done their homework with that. So, but yeah, I mean, this is a great time of year to reflect at the end of the year about a number of things, and think about what's going to be going on in the future here. So, just in case as things get a little bit crazier during the holiday season, I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a happy early new year. I know that, I've been in an extended stay for about a month. I'll be in one for another month, until our home is ready. And that's always been kind of when you go through that kind of thing, it's an interesting journey, but it's also kind of fun to look back on. And it's also one to just kind of reflect on where you've been and where you're going. And it kind of strengthens the bonds that you have with the people that you go through with it. And and that's always a wonderful thing. So I'm very thankful to have the wife that I do and to be in the situation that I am because of the work that we do together. So, shout out to my wife, Alicia, as well. And I hope you guys, have a wonderful weekend.
Adam Schefter told me years ago, this is the time to contemplate, appreciate, and celebrate. That is a wrap for the Audible Live. Thanks everyone for watching. Follow us all on Twitter. You know the drill. Just wanted to say that. And also stay tuned and stay frosty.